we're going to be giving a series of webinars and seminars over the next several months, and this is the first of them. This will provide a general introduction to the program that the state of Kentucky really has done an extraordinary job building, partly through the FAST partnership program and through some matching funds from the Commonwealth as well. And then I'll give a kind of a basic overview of the SBIR STTR program and talk a little bit about maybe some strategies and some aspects of the program that even those of you who are pretty experienced may not have necessarily been exposed to today. So that's the goal today, an overview of SBIR STTR 101. And I'm here with my colleague, Lara Background. She'll be giving part of the seminar as well. And the way that we like to hold our seminars is as much participation as possible. So feel free to jump in anytime with questions throughout our presentation so that we can really kind of address and personalize to all of you who are here. Okay. Let's see. Lara, maybe, okay. Look good? Okay. All right. So I just want to make sure I'm advancing the slides correctly. First, the KY Innovation Investment Program, KIIP, is the reason that we're here today. Really, Kentucky has taken leadership, and we've been to all 50 states, really, in terms of helping them advance their SBIR STTR programs. And I've got to say, Kentucky is absolutely a leader in this regard. So congratulations to the team and to this group. Kentucky, in particular, was awarded a federal, state, and state technology FAST grant, and that was to increase the number and quality of SBIR STTR applications and awards in the Commonwealth. And in addition to this FAST grant that was awarded by the Small Business Association, the Cabinet for Economic Development has committed additional resources to further boost this program. So the program has been termed KIIP, used to create a permanent engine, so really a sustainable long-term support network to maximize the assets of the top SBIR STTR candidates in the state. My group, Eva Garland Consulting, has been contracted to administer KIIP, and we will talk a little bit more about our organization in a short while. Okay. So, why is there a need for this program? As you all know, in the 21st century, Kentucky's economy is really going to rely on entrepreneurship in the state. And entrepreneurs are going to need these financial resources to get started and to catalyze development and advancement of their innovations. And the reason there's a focus on this SBIR STTR program is because it provides $3 billion each year exactly for that purpose of catalyzing the acceleration of new innovations. So Kentucky has recognized the importance of leveraging the program to advance entrepreneurship in the state. If we look historically, where does Kentucky stack up in terms of generating SBIR STTR funding? You can see that as a state, Kentucky, it's sort of in the middle of all the states, but really based on the innovation and entrepreneurship that has been building in the state and the focus in the universities on increasing entrepreneurship, there's really an objective to bring that number higher, bring that 220 million per year up greater, because that can spur additional innovation. So the goal and objective here is to increase SBIR STTR funding, get Kentucky up the list, and increase the impact of SBIR STTRs in the state.
You got a quick question.
Yeah.
So the volume of applicants is large, is that directly correlated, or are we just under applying? We just don't have enough people applying, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's the two aspects. There's the number of applications, and then there's the number of successful proposals. I don't have that data. I don't know if anyone has. That's a great question. I think you've got to sort of do both at the same time. You can't just increase the number of applications, and you can't just kind of take the existing group and try to make them stronger, because you only have a certain total number of SBIR STTRs that a single company can win. So I think that the state is really trying to do both. I think in addition to this KIIP program, the match program, which a lot of you are here today as a result of, is also spurring kind of increased, growth of entrepreneurial firms in Kentucky, from outside of Kentucky, as well as within the state. So the KIP program, there's 3 aspects. It's fairly unique from other types of SBIR, STTR support programs, in that there's 3 stages. There's the strategy, there's proposal preparation, and there's post-award support. So most other states, when they talk about SBIR, STTR support, they're really just looking at the proposal preparation and kind of leaving out the other 2, which are just as critically important, if not more important, in terms of really leveraging and maximizing the impact of the SBIR, STTR program. And so the strategy starts with taking a look at companies' technologies and lining up what are the best opportunities to support advancement of those technologies. So what are the SBIR, STTR opportunities that are the best fit? And then moving into the proposal preparation once that strategy has been developed, and finally providing that post-award support so that once you have those funds, you're able to maximize the impact of those funds on your company. So a little bit more detail about how this would work. So companies can enroll in the KIP program, and we've had several enroll already. And once you enroll in the program, the first stage is that strategic plan development. That can take a few months for a very early stage new company, or it can be pretty quick for companies who are already experienced in applying for SBIR, STTR awards. So the idea of the program is to really customize the program for each individual company based on what's going to best serve their needs. Then moving into the actual grant writing, and then the idea there is that can take a couple months for more experienced companies, up to several months. Sometimes you may need to complete some additional preliminary research before you're really ready to apply. So there can be quite a long process till when you're really ready to put in a competitive proposal. And then finally, after you put in your first proposal, what's unique about the program is that we're looking at to leverage and maximize not just one submission, but as many submissions as makes sense for that individual company to leverage all the different funding opportunities that may be available. Then once the companies receive the SBIR, STTR awards, the program assists them in applying for the matching funds through the Commonwealth. And also includes post-award accounting and management. So the idea is helping to manage those funds once you receive them. There's very complicated rule books around what qualifies as a direct and indirect, allowable, unallowable. When do I need to do my reporting? How do I sign up for the various payment management and other types of systems so I can actually get the money? All those sort of questions we try to streamline as much as possible through this program. And finally, it includes monthly presentations, of which this is the first. Okay. A little bit more detail on the strategy on what you can expect as a company who enrolls in KIP. The company would, upon enrollment, would complete an application form to provide the program with a general idea of the company's technology, of the innovation, of the business plan, and the funding objectives for that company. And then there would be an initial call with a consultant to discuss the strategy for grant applications. What have you already tried? What's worked? What hasn't worked? Get kind of an assessment of where that company's at so that our consultants can then provide strategic guidance that's really customized as a best fit for the company. So we're not looking to say, hey, here's 100 grants you can apply for. We're looking to really understand your business, understand where you want to go, what's going to be your first product on your market. Is that coming out 6 months from now, 12 months from now? How much money do you need to get there? What's the second product? And kind of going through all those different aspects of your business plan and then overlaying where non-dilutive grant funding can really help to accelerate you getting your business to where you would want to go anyway, but faster and more efficiently by utilizing the SBIR STTR program. Okay. And one thing we do, and I've focused on this before, but is really maximizing shots on goal. So how can we strategically put together a core grant application that might go to one agency, one SBIR STTR program, and then potentially take that core application, reposition it, tweak it, change the maybe what your end product's going to be, and then be able to get additional funding into your company so that you can really start to build your company and advance it in as many different verticals as you're looking to go as a business. Okay, so once we've developed that strategy, Now it's time to implement the strategy. And the implementation means that we've got to get proposals in that are as competitive as possible. We really want to have as high a hit rate as we can. And so in this phase of implementation for the KIIP program, the company would prepare an initial draft of the proposals, specific aims, technical objectives, be reaching out to obtain letters of support, any other supporting documentation that's going to help to enhance the application. All of this is kind of done in consultation and under the guidance of a consultant who's going to be able to kind of help you understand the process. So the consultant would talk to you, would have an initial call at the beginning of any grant proposal preparation process, discuss what are some of these long lead time items we need to get going on right now, and what are some of the things that you can save till later. So really help you kind of structure that plan of attack on how you're going to be able to prepare that proposal. Your job is then to implement that plan. So reaching out to your collaborators, completing your registration, submitting your application, writing your application. All along the way through the KIIP program, you've got a consultant who's essentially by your side, who's going to be able to read drafts of your proposal, who's going to assist you with the budget preparation. Take a look at your proposal before you submit it and do a review. A lot of individuals on our team sit on SBIR STTR review panel, so we can give you that kind of mock review before you even submit it. The idea here is if you're an experienced SBIR STTR company, you might just want a final review. You might feel comfortable writing the proposal. If you're less experienced, we can handhold all the way through from the beginning to the end.
Eva, we have a question from the webinar audience. They're asking, will there be a principal industry focus sought by the KIP program, predominantly DoD, DOE, HHS, etc.?
Yeah, so my understanding is that there's not a principal industry sought by the program, and so it goes across all of the different agencies and all of the different types of innovations. Okay. Then the third phase is the support. So once you get that first grant, there are some compliance and accounting regulations that you need to establish as a firm, and our team consists of 7 grant compliance experts who can really just kind of walk you through what is it that you need for your phase 1 right now, and what is it that can wait till later until you get your phase 2 in place in terms of all the different policies you need to put in place for your company, your reporting system. What are the different reporting requirements for each agency? Each agency are a little bit different. When do you need to put those reports in? What should those reports look like? Just logging onto the system sometimes can be a challenge sometimes with these government agencies. So we can assist you with that entire process. And so the expectations is that the company will adopt will be compliant with the terms of the award, but our team can assist you every step of the way. Another part of the support is preparing the application for the Kentucky Match Program. And so, we're happy to help you look at drafts of that application and assist you with putting together as competitive a proposal as possible so that hopefully you can earn those matching funds that many of you in this room have earned. Okay. Just a little bit about our team. Our objective as a company is to help advance scientific innovation. And what we found is that the best way to do this is to help companies find that funding that they need to get through that so-called valley of death. So essentially turning innovations into commercial products. And funding from the SBIR STTR program is really one of the major sources of capital that can be used to help to advance these early stage technologies. So our team consists of 16 PhD level grant writing experts, all of who serve on SBIR STTR review panels. We've got direct relationships with the program officers at all the agencies, and many of us have started and grown our own companies as well using SBIR STTR funding. In addition, I mentioned we've got 7 grant compliance specialists and accountants on the team who are focused exclusively on doing accounting and grants management and compliance for grant-funded companies. Over 200 years of combined experience in our fields, over 500 clients in 44 states, as well as some other countries who are looking to try to figure out how to get into this great program in the U.S., which is unfortunately limited to U.S. owned firms, but there's some other other sources of funding that we work on with some outside of the U.S. firms. And we're particularly proud that our clients have secured over $200 million in predominantly SBIR, STTR funding. We also have a couple of books, and the nice thing about joining the KIIP program is these books are available to you. So if you join the program, we will ship one to you. A little bit about my background. I started out in academics. I got a PhD in chemistry from Caltech, moved to North Carolina to serve on the chemistry faculty there, and then left based on an opportunity to work at a small company, developing a new class of small molecules to potentiate antibiotic resistance. And that company is called Agile Sciences. I'll talk a little bit more later about our journey to raising about $12 million in grant funding to support the development of that technology. I've spent, I guess, over 20 years now helping universities, entrepreneurs, and companies secure grant funding to advance their technologies. And I've been an NIH SBIR STTR as well as a CRP reviewer, and authored the books that I mentioned on the prior slide. I'm going to now have Lara introduce herself.
Hi, my name's Lara Squarick, and prior to enrolling in my PhD program, I worked at a small Toronto startup that developed the first pharmacogenetics test to receive 510(k) approval. I was part of the R&D team there, and I also was involved in the massive regulatory overhaul that had to be performed to get that through the FDA. So following that, I pursued a PhD in medical and molecular genetics from the University of Toronto, followed by postdoctoral training at UC Berkeley. And so I have a fairly broad scientific background. And since that time, I've also worked at a North Carolina startup where I played a role in technology assessment and development, commercialization, and was an in-house SBIR STTR proposal writer. So I am one of the scientific consultants that you might be working with if you enroll in the KIP program. And the 15 others have quite similar backgrounds, but we all have our own strengths that we can bring to your proposal. So we do a good job at EGC trying to match companies with grant writers who have similar experience. I'll turn it back over to Eva.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll jump into the agenda for the day, which is our SBIR STTR 101. We've got a question.
We have a question. How much does the consulting program cost?
I think it's free, right? Yep, it's free. So you have to enroll and be accepted, but it's supported by the FAST grant, the SBA FAST grant that Kentucky won through a very competitive process, I'll say, and as well as matching funds from the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So it is a free program, which I would definitely recommend taking advantage of. Okay, so yes.
How long has it been in Kentucky?
Oh gosh, how long has that program been in Kentucky?
The match program? No, they can't. Oh, just this last year we started. Oh, good. Okay, because I was wondering how can we miss that out. Okay, thank you. So
the question and answer for those on the webinar is the KIP program was just started this year. So this is a brand new program. So we're just getting the first few companies enrolled and looking forward to working with a lot more. Okay, so SBIR STTR 101, the first question is, why do you need SBIR grants? I mean, you've got this beautiful picture of the path to fund your innovation all the way to commercialization. You start with your bank account, then you get your friends and family's bank accounts, then you move on to angel investors, and then on to venture capital. And that's the, idyllic way, but unfortunately that doesn't happen, probably in 9 out of 10 cases. You get a gap in funding along the way if you try to rely solely on investor funding sources. And one of the best ways to fill this gap is through the SBIR STTR program. In fact, that's essentially why the SBIR STTR program was started. It's a program that's been around for a while. The SBIR program was established in 1982, STTR in 1992, established by the federal government, by Congress, with several goals. The first, to meet federal research and development needs to keep the United States at the forefront of innovation, to increase private sector commercialization of innovation so that innovation didn't sort of get stuck in that R, it could move through R&D into commercialization. Stimulate technological innovation, provide incentive and motivation to increase the innovation in the country. And a final goal was to foster and encourage participation in innovation and entrepreneurship by socially and economically disadvantaged persons. Okay. So the program, it's a $3 billion a year set aside to support research, development, and commercialization of new products. It's a 3-phase approach. So the idea is that the government doesn't necessarily want to take a huge risk right at phase 1, right, when you still have some R&D that you need to do to have a proof of concept so that you can, ensure that your product is going to be feasible. So it starts with a phase 1 that's about $100,000 to $225,000 depending on the agency. And the idea of your phase 1 is to prove some key milestone. So, if you've got an idea and you need to create the first prototype, or if you need to, maybe you've got a drug you're developing, you've got in vitro data, you need to get in vivo proof of concept, but some sort of proof of concept to demonstrate that you've de-risked that technology sufficiently so that the government can make a larger investment, and that's your phase 2 award. Your phase 2 award is worth between $750,000 and $1.5 million in general, depending on the agency. Some go a little lower, some go a little higher. And that really can be used for the development aspect. So if you think of phase 1 as your R, your research, let's prove this concept, and then phase 2 be your development and take your product forward toward commercialization. And then importantly, there's a phase 3 where there's no actual money from the government. So it's a little bit counterintuitive, but phase 3 is actually the most important of the 3 phases because it is the act of actually commercializing your product. So even when you're starting on writing your first phase 1, you actually want to think about phase 3 first. What's that product going to look like? And then back out what are the R&D steps to take along the way. And from that, you can carve out what your phase 1 proposal should contain. Okay. There are a total of 11 participating agencies for the SBIR and STTR program, and 5 agencies that have only SBIR awards. The agencies that have the largest amount of money for external R&D are the ones that provide both SBIR and STTR. I've shown them on the slide here. You can see the Department of Defense is the largest, Department of Energy, National Science Foundation, NASA, and Department of Health and Human Services round out the top 5. Department of Health and Human Services is the parent agency under which NIH, CDC, and FDA are all a part of. And sometimes you'll hear interchangeably Department of Health and Human Service and NIH, so don't get too confused on that because I think that can be a little bit confusing at first. Okay, here are the budgets by agency. Department of Defense by far the largest, followed by Health and Human Services, NIH, and then Department of Energy, NASA, and National Science Foundation have similar budgets. You can see what a huge disparity is that, all others together are a very, very small piece of that pie. They're still important. There's still good, money and resources to be had from these agencies. But if you're looking at kind of where is the biggest buckets of funding, DoD and HHS is really by far the majority. So given that different agencies have very different buckets of funding, it's also interesting to look at the types of projects that are awarded by the different agencies, because what you can find is that you may initially sort of think your technology fits one agency, but it actually might have applicability in a lot of different agencies. Agencies have very interesting and broad interests. So I thought I'd do this, show you 4 actual funded proposals. These are all phase 1 SBIRs and 4 different agencies. Okay, and the question is, okay, which of these agencies funded each of these proposals? So I'll kind of walk through so you can think about what your answer would be, and I'll take a show of hands in a minute. So developing a ground station for airborne wind energy system, opener occupancy profiles for energy reduction, forward osmosis system for treatment of fracking water, and an integrated cook stove heating electricity generation for small homes. And the 4 agencies are Department of Energy, U.S. Department of Agriculture, Environmental Protection Agency, and the Department of Defense. So let's start with the Ground Station for Airborne Wind Energy System. Raise your hand if you think that's Department of Energy for wind energy. What about Department of Agriculture? EPA. And Department of Defense. Okay. It's actually Department of Agriculture. So I think I paused too long after I said that. A few hands went up. The occupancy profiles for energy reduction, we're down to 3. So energy reduction, Department of Energy, EPA, and Department of Defense. One person got it in the back. The forward osmosis system for treatment of fracking water, Department of Energy, and EPA. Department of Energy. And then finally, the cook stove is going to be the EPA. So as you can see, if you have a project, the whole purpose of the slide is to say, look broadly at the potential opportunities, because it may not just be where you sort of initially think is an opportunity for you to achieve SBIR, STTR funding. Okay. So moving into, why would I want to go after an SBIR, STTR grant? There's some obvious advantages. First is free money. It's non-dilutive. You don't have to give up equity for it. It funds high risk, high reward research. So it's one of the pots of money that's sort of hardest to get in terms of you still got some risk associated with your product development. It supplements other sources of funding. This is important because even if you've just gone out and raised your nice big Series A at $2, $3, $4, $5 million, it's nice to have that supplement. Again, that kind of de-risks the investment that you get from the outside investors. And finally, you get free feedback via the review process. And that also is really nice. I mean, if you think about how much you would spend to get experts in the field to review your entire business plan and your development strategy and your scientific plan, and you get all this for free via the review process, that's enormously valuable. But there's also disadvantages. The first is the long waiting time between proposal submission and award. It can be several months. So that's just a reality of the program. It's highly competitive. Many of the pay lines for some of the agencies are lower than 10%. So you really need to be putting your best foot forward with every application. The usage of funds can be highly restricted. It's just for that R&D which you've proposed. You can't take that and kind of switch once you receive the money. Okay, so is it worth the effort? I just like to show one statistic here, which statistically about 20% of companies will survive their first 5 years. Of the companies that we've worked with that are grant funded, 99% are still in business. So does SBIR, STTR mean that you're going to have a successful business? Maybe, maybe not. But I feel like it'll give your business a chance. It'll give you a chance to vet that science far enough along so that you aren't just kind of dependent on what happened to the stock market yesterday. It really gives you that opportunity to take the proper steps in order to vet the science and to determine whether or not the commercial concept that you had is viable. A couple of quick case studies that I'll walk through. The company that I was at previously was Agile Sciences. I mentioned it was founded in 2007. This is really what stimulated me getting very, very interested in the SBIR STTR program because in 2007 we did well. We raised a Series A, $1 million. But then 2008, when we're getting ready for our 5 million Series B, everything just fell apart. And I'm a scientist by nature. I had a lab to run. I had employees to pay. I had rent to pay. And there was no money to be had. And so that's when I really went back to my roots in academics and said, there's got to be another way. There's got to be a way that doesn't rely on, the whether or not the investors are going to, be able to contribute to our company. And so that's, when I found the SBIR STTR program and realized what a wonderful program it was, hard to navigate, very fragmented. Every agency operates so differently. Took me a long time to learn it, and I still don't know it, I think as well as many people on our team do. But it was really critical for us. And so the company over the next subsequent several years was able to raise about $12 million, mostly in SBIR, STTR funding, to be able to continue to advance that product development. Another case study of a company that many of you have probably heard of is iRobot. You may know the robot today, but actually the company started out and in the 90s and didn't actually have their first product until 2002. Even then, it didn't really catch on right away. And so iRobot was able to really leverage a lot of non-dilutive SBIR STTR funding, mostly through the Department of Defense, in order to advance that core technology for a number of different applications that you can see here. So they raised $10.2 million in SBIR STTR funding. And if you think from the government's perspective, the government invested $10 million in iRobot. Last year, iRobot's revenue was $800 million. And so the government got a lot of taxes out of that. So they ended up doing pretty well with that $10.2 million investment. Okay. All right, so we'll get into some more of the details and Lara will walk through that. There is a question, the Kentucky Science and Technology Corporations, do they still offer the Phase 0 program?
The answer would be yes. So the question was, does the Kentucky Office of Entrepreneurial Development still offer the Phase 0 program? And the answer is yes. So I'm going to continue and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the details about understanding where you as a company might fit into the SBIR STTR program. So how do you know if you're eligible for this? So to be eligible for SBIR STTR, you have to be, first of all, you have to be an American company, and you have to fall under the small business qualification. So what does that mean? That means you have to be a for-profit business, you have to have 500 or fewer employees, and you must be greater than 50% US owned by one or more individuals, other business concerns, or a combination of these. And interestingly, the NIH, for the NIH only, you can be greater than 50% owned by multiple venture capital companies, hedge funds, private equity, or a combination of these. But no single entity can own more than 50%. And again, that's only for the NIH. Oh, I'm sorry. That's only for the NIH SBIR. For the others, you have to be greater than 50% owned by one or more individuals. My apologies. There we go. So what are the requirements for a competitive proposal? You want your technology to be at an appropriate stage of development, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. You also want your technology to be innovative. You want to have a clear development path, a business plan, and importantly, you want to have a sufficient amount of time to apply to your proposal. You don't want to be pulling it together at the last minute because that becomes very obvious to the reviewers and it puts you in a less competitive position. So what does it mean to have your technology at an appropriate stage of development? So I've shown here a scale called the technology readiness level, and it's used to assess the maturity level of a particular technology. And there's kind of a sweet spot for SBIR, STTR Phase 1 proposals, and that's in the technology readiness level 3 to 4 spot. So importantly, to be competitive for the SBIR, STTR program, your technology must be beyond the concept stage, and it must have passed some early stage R&D milestones. They're not interested in funding someone with an idea to see if that idea is going to go anywhere. There's a certain amount of de-risking that needs to be involved where you can have sufficient preliminary data to demonstrate that you know what you're talking about, that you can do what you're proposing to do, that your technology has passed some very sort of basic feasibility milestones. And so it's important to make sure that that preliminary data is robust and has been the result of well-designed experiments. And some of the funding opportunities do say that they don't require preliminary data, But we found that it actually is quite necessary for a successful SBIR STTR proposal. So sometimes it's worth the time taking a couple of months to develop that preliminary data just to give your proposal a solid foundation moving forward. Your preliminary data, as I said, it must be robust, it must provide support for the feasibility of your technology, and it must be generated from well-designed experiments. Now, that being said, you also don't want a technology that's too far advanced. So if you have a product that's, for instance, say you're developing a mini lab for use out in the field, and you're looking for some funding to do some performance tests just to prove its ruggedness, that would be at a high technology readiness level, and that would be beyond the funding scope of an SBIR STTR program. Now, that being said, some of the agencies, including the Department of Defense, the Department of Energy, they will sometimes be asking for something very specific in their SBIR funding opportunity announcements. And in that case, they may actually be requesting something with a high technology readiness level. For instance, the Department of Homeland Security might be looking for an algorithm that can track financial exchanges worldwide to look for money moving to terrorist organizations. And they might be looking for something that's highly developed. So it's very important, and this goes for all of the different funding opportunities, it's very important to carefully read the funding opportunity announcement to get a sense of what exactly they're looking for. But for the NIH, NSF, and for the majority of SBIR STTRs, you want to be coming in around that level 3 and level 4. So if your technology is more of a concept, then again, consider focusing on generating some strong and robust preliminary data to support feasibility. You also want your idea, product, solution to be innovative. So what makes something innovative? It must be groundbreaking and not iterative. So they're not looking for a tweak to something that's already well developed. An example of something that's iterative would be if you identified a new paint that you thought could be applied to wind turbines to make them more efficient. That's iterative because it's just applying a tweak to something that already exists. What the SBIR STTR program is designed for is for that higher risk, novel idea where you're bringing something in that doesn't exist in the market and that could be potentially groundbreaking. And so it's really important to understand how you and your product and your idea would be differentiated from the competition. And that's something that needs to be embedded in your proposal. You need to call out why your particular project is innovative, what problem it's solving, how it's going to be different from anything else that's out there or that could be in development. So for an example, there is no other product in the market capable of delivering minimally invasive ultrasound therapy directly into deep-seated gliomas. I have a product that does. That's innovative. It's the only thing out there. There's nobody else touching that. Another example is BoomCat will deliver a minimally invasive therapy more efficiently than available products with minimal side effects, reducing the time between visits to 1 month. So you want to state how your innovation, how your ideas and your products are innovative, and also how that innovation will change either the current landscape, the standard of care, the energy market, whatever area you are focusing on. You also want to have a high impact. So what will be the impact of your product? You want to talk about the size of the unmet need. For example, in 2017, it was estimated that 1,700,000 new cases of cancer would be diagnosed, with 500,000 of those patients projected to die from their disease. So if you're coming in with a novel diagnostic for reducing the number of patients that are going to die, then clearly you're going to have a high impact, and you want to put that up front and center. Another way to actually address the impact of your technology, product, or idea is to talk about the costs. And this is also important. You can be talking about the costs in a financial or a societal level. And one example is a recent study estimates the yearly cost of malignant tumors in hospitalized patients at $5.4 billion. So you'll notice with these two examples, one of the key things is that they're specific and they're quantitative. So you don't want to just be saying, well, you know, I'm going to have a high impact and reduce the effects of cancer in patients. You want to have numbers, and you want to show your audience being the reviewers, that you know what you're talking about. It's really good to paint a picture of before and after. For example, this is a telephone. This is what the telephone used to look like. But here I am coming in with a brand new core technology that will enable a telephone to now look like this. So here's a very clear example of before and after situation. You also want a clear development path. You want to have a clear idea of how your technology will get from the current point in development to a commercial product. And that's something a lot of people coming out of academics often struggle with, because in academia, we aren't taught how to have that vision of how you get from an idea to a commercial product. And so it can really help to collaborate with consultants on this, or to bring in somebody who has worked in a commercial development team. These steps in the development will serve as a critical review criteria for your SBIR, STTR. The reviewers are going to want to see that you have a plan and that you know how you're going to get from A to B. So again, use consultants with commercial development experience to vet your development plan. It's also important that you have a business plan. NIH phase 1 proposals don't ask for a commercialization plan. That comes into the phase 2, but pretty much the rest of the agencies do have some component of a commercialization plan within the phase 1 proposal. So you want to be developing that right from the beginning. Your business plan will provide an idea of the commercial potential of your technology and your plan for getting that product commercialized. And it will show that you are thinking from the very beginning about the needs of the key consumers of your product, and that you have a really good value proposition. And again, use consultants to construct and vet the business plan if you don't have that expertise in-house. There's the Small Business Development Center here in Kentucky has sites across the state, and I believe they can play a role in helping people develop business plans if that's something you need. And as I mentioned before, and Eva had alluded to before as well, time is very important. So this is just a schematic of how much time we estimate it takes to put in a phase 2 NIH proposal. Preparing and submitting grants takes a lot of time. There are a lot of details, there are a lot of little things that you might not have thought of. There's a lot of moving pieces. And so giving yourself sufficient time ensures that you will be able to meet all of those needs in a competitive way. So we have actually estimated that it takes about 100 hours to put together a phase 1 NIH proposal, and about 200 hours for a phase 2 NIH proposal. And many of the components require a significant amount of lead time. For instance, if you're a new company, you need to register with the government, and that can sometimes take several weeks. You need letters of support. That can take weeks to months, depending on who you're asking for those letters from. You want people to be able to review your proposal, provide critical input. That takes time. So one of the best things you can do for yourself is to ensure that you start early and give yourself sufficient time. Organization is extremely important, just to keep on top of all of these moving pieces. And as I said, we estimate approximately 100 hours for a phase 1 proposal. So how do you choose between an SBIR and an STTR? What would help make that choice? So the SBIR does not require participation of a nonprofit research partner. The small business can do all of the work themselves, whereas an STTR requires a collaboration with a nonprofit research partner that's embedded into the opportunity. With an SBIR, 67% of the budget must be company expenses for a phase 1, and 50% must be company expenses for a phase 2. Well, for an STTR, at least 40% of the budget must be company expenses, and at least 30% must be from the partnering research institution. So you can see that if you're a very small company or a virtual company and you don't really have the capacity to do much of the work in-house, it might be worth looking at an STTR. That might fit your situation better. Yeah, go ahead.
So if I have like a multi-institution, non-profit, like 2 institutions, for the STTR, is that the effort from the budget from the 2 institutions add together at least 30%, or one of them have to be?
Right, so the question was, if the small business has 2 nonprofit institutions that they're working with, can those 2 be combined to make up the 30% for an STTR? And the answer to that is no. So the way it works is you actually have a subaward that goes to the institution. And so in a way, they're kind of considered a sub-PI. And so one of those institutions would have to be at least 30%. You could then bring on the other institution to make up the extra 30% that's missing from this math. Yeah, but you can't combine a bunch of nonprofits to make up that 30%. For an SBIR, the PI must have primary employment with the small business. Whereas for the STTR, the PI can be employed with either the small business or a partnering research institution. So again, if you're an academic trying to spin out a company or trying to commercialize something from your own lab, an STTR might be something that you're looking for. There are 11 participating agencies for the SBIR program. However, there are only 5 participating agencies for the STTR program. So again, your technology and your particular solution may also dictate whether you're applying for an SBIR or an STTR. And finally, the SBIR budget is $2.6 billion per year, whereas the STTR budget is $300 million. However, I wouldn't use that as a criterion to choose. It seems that the success rate for an SBIR versus an STTR is approximately the same because there are just far fewer STTR applicants. So how do you make this decision between an SBIR versus the STTR? How do you choose between 2 things that seem relatively similar but are probably quite different underneath? So your deciding factors would be that your PI availability. Is the PI available to work at the company in at least a 51% employment level upon the time of award? And also your budget considerations, as I mentioned in the previous slide. Can the small business make up 67% of that budget, or do you need to share it with a nonprofit? Some common misconceptions about the difference between these 2 are that the first, some people believe that the university retains more IP with your STTRs, and this is actually false. So the subaward agreements are essentially identical for both SBIR and STTR. So your company will need to negotiate IP terms for either mechanism. Secondly, some people believe that STTRs are more academic in nature. And again, this is false. So both SBIRs and STTRs are evaluated for commercial potential. Neither of these funding opportunity mechanisms are awarded to hypothesis-driven research. They are focused specifically on bringing a specific product idea to the market. And they're evaluated in the same manner. So some agencies will let you switch between SBIRs and STTRs for phase 1 and phase 2. Certainly the NIH and the NSF allow that. The other 3 agencies that have STTRs, the Department of Energy, the Department of Defense, and USDA, have sort of unique unique pathways to applying for your phase 2. So there are a lot of restrictions on who can apply and when you can apply. And so I'm not completely sure whether or not, I think it might depend upon your particular funding opportunity announcement and negotiating with the actual agency in that case. But that's something to keep in mind. If you needed to do an STTR for a phase 1 to get yourself off the ground, and then be able to bring that all in-house with the company for an SBIR. That's something that's possible. And so the last thing on our list is how we get started, and I'm going to turn that back over to Eva.
Thank you, Lara. And there was a question that came in, which is the experience and the opportunity for the program to go across all the different agencies. And yes, this program is to support all 11 of those agencies and SBIR STTR applications across the board. So how do I get started? You understand the background, the basics of the SBIR STTR. What do you do next? I'll walk through each of these very briefly today because I know we're getting toward the end of our time. But the key point is that all of our other seminars are going to do a lot deeper dive into each of these aspects of getting started and preparing a competitive proposal. So the first thing you should do is definitely take the time to search for opportunities. As I was trying to indicate earlier, there may be a lot of opportunities that you may not be initially aware of unless you take the time to do the search. A few hours of your time can save you a lot of aggravation down the road and submitting proposals that don't get funded. So really take the time to develop the strategy up front. I feel like as a firm, that's what has helped make our clients most successful, probably more than anything else, is developing that initial strategy. Secondly, there's a bunch of registrations you need to complete. We'll have a whole webinar on how to complete registrations. Make sure you leave at least 6 to 8 weeks to complete all the required registrations that are necessary in order to be eligible for an award. The most challenging of these is the SAM.gov registration, so that one can take several weeks. Then once you've kind of got the legwork in place, you want to really think through your specific aims, because that's going to be probably the most important evaluation criteria, is exactly what are you proposing, and do the tasks that you're proposing really fit within the scope of the mechanism. So we'll spend some time talking about that as well. You'll need to build your team. I've probably never seen a proposal funded with just one person on the team. You may have one person at your company, but you need to build a team of individuals who have the expertise, both business and scientific, in order to appropriately advance your technology. You'll need to develop your commercialization strategy. Remember, the SBIR STTR program really starts with phase 3 and works backwards, so you need to understand and be able to present a picture of what that final commercialized product is going to look like before you're even ready to apply for that initial phase 1. Next, very importantly, is to talk to the program officer at the agency. The program officers are extremely valuable resources. They're very up to date on what's being funded, what's not being funded in their agency. And there's a lot of really good questions that you can ask the program officer that we'll talk about in a subsequent webinar to really kind of get to the bottom of, is this a good fit for you? What's your probability of success? Even things like, how much money can I ask for in this agency? Because we often see companies maybe applying for less than what they potentially could get from some of these opportunities. Once you've done all that, I would check all these off the list first, and then you're ready to write that proposal. So we will cover that in kind of each of those in detail. In terms of additional resources for just getting started in this SBIR STTR process, definitely encourage you to take a look at SBIR.gov. That's the website that the government has that kind of describes all the SBIR programs. It's a nice program. It's a nice website. You can search by topic, so you can put in topics and see maybe what SBIR STTR opportunities are available across all agencies for that particular topic. Also, each agency has their own SBIR STTR website. So once you've identified maybe NASA is a good fit for me, you can get onto that website, look at things like when they release their opportunities. Some agencies, it's only once a year is the window to apply for SBIR STTRs. Others have up to 3 windows per year. So take a look at the website of each agency that you may be interested in applying for. Finally, there's some resources on our website, links to all the different agencies and some other basic information about the SBIR STTR program. Our books are available. They're available on Amazon, but as a participant in KIP, that's included in the program. So. Okay, and I'll just tee up the next seminar topics that are coming up. They're all on the list here, as well as the dates when we'll be holding those. I'll take any questions at this point. Yes.
We're an existing company that has received a few SBIRs. Where do you sign up to join KIP?
Great question. Their website?
Yeah, you can contact the cabinet. You can contact us through our kyinnovation.com.
So the question is where to sign up for KIP, and the answer is through KY Innovation website, or contact Christine and Neil directly. Any other questions? Yes.
I'm curious, any insight regarding the funding decisions beyond the proposal itself? You know, there's the technology and business plan, et cetera. Do the agencies have secondary criteria such as relative size of the company or SBIR history or anything that's sort of beyond the proposals themselves that they're trying to fulfill the funding decision?
Right, so each agency does have a separate set of review criteria. Company size is not a specific one. History of SBIR, STTR funding becomes important once you've reached a certain number of phase 2s. They want to see that you've successfully commercialized the product that you developed in your phase 2. I believe it's 15. Once you've received 15 phase 2s, but I'll double check that number. You do need to provide a report as part of your application that explains how you've successfully commercialized those prior products. I guess what I've seen is that if you keep going to the same agency over and over, it just depends on the agency. So for example, Department of Defense, there's some companies that have many DoD SBIR STTRs. It's very common for companies, for DoD to get many. Whereas on the other extreme, I would say maybe NSF, where they really only want you to hold one NSF SBIR STTR at a time. And part of it's because they have less money, so they kind of want to spread it out more. But that does bring up a good point, which is it's very important to carefully review the criteria for each agency that you're applying for, because they are different. Any other questions? Okay. To end by thanking all of you for being here today, and for Base 10 for hosting, Small Business Administration for the FAST funding, and most importantly, KY Innovation and the team who's just done an amazing job bringing this program to fruition.